Much, but we haven't touched the issue of global warming or global climate change or global crisis, and now I think we all agree it should be called a global emergency. Of course, it's a crisis, but in addition to crisis, it's an emergency because it needs immediate action, and that is what's behind the name change. It's changing the framing on this. I believe that
Yeah,
the
Extinction Rebellion kind of describes it as the emergency, and they started that. And, but in America, the term really has not got here yet.
Yeah, and in parts, I think in the UK, for example, they're trying to label them more and more as domestic terrorists with their actions. This is also with the retaliations. They're coming, and we know this.
Yeah. So regarding the Arctic Circle, it's heating 3 times, and the slide got cut over here at the top, but it says Arctic circuit warming 3 times more rapidly than the rest of the planet. This is primarily where the action is right now. And ice disappearing is more rapidly than they predicted till now. So we haven't really touched this big issue in about a year, and since then the news have only gotten worse. So yeah, you wanna talk about this video clip?
Yes, this video clip I took from a very, very long, like almost 2 hour long rant that Roger Hallam gave on a park bench a couple months ago, and he just posted it this last week on his own website. Very small number of people have seen it, and I picked this particular clip out because he's talking about the speed at which the Arctic ice is disappearing, and he's going to say when it's going to be gone, and he's going to give 3 references to where he's getting his facts. I looked up 2 of them, and I couldn't understand the spelling of the person in the middle, so I couldn't find him. But anyway, I put the 2 links on. We can look at him or not. Point is, I put him in there because there's a lot of talk about the science. None of us dispute the science, but yeah, I mean, what is the truth? And what's really going on? So I basically when Roger talks, he's preaching to the choir, and he knows that. We actually talked very briefly once, and but anyway, that's what's going on. So I just wanted to emphasize that again, even though we really don't have to. We're preaching to the choir that the science is real. This is not. There's no, we're really dinosaurs if we even talk about if this is happening or not. It's happening. And so we got to deal with it. And that's what we're talking about on our show today, right? We got to deal with it. That's the message. So anyway.
Let's watch what he says.
Okay, so here we go. This is Overland 2012, Vavris, I think, 2012, and Gorino 2020 et al. So they're all said this 2035 or before. You can go and look it up on the internet. It takes about 30 seconds to look it up. Get your ruler out. 2030, 2035, we get 0 ice in the Arctic.
Yeah, that's it. 0 ice in the Arctic by 2035. If not sooner.
Yeah, and if that happens, Greenland is going to melt. That alone will add 7.5 meters or 25 feet of water to the oceans, which is the equivalent of a 3-story building. Can you imagine that? A 3-story building of water filling the
Well, can you imagine the Antarctic ice sheet being lifted by that 3-story building and adding another 3-story building on top of it? Because at times in the archaeological record, though, that's a geological record, because archaeology has to do more with human history. But you know, in the global history of the Earth, when it's been this warm before, there has been as much as 20 meters of sea level rise. So, you know, that kind of rise can't happen overnight, but it can happen fast enough to really mess us up.
But guys, you got to also see the opportunities in this. You know, once Greenland is ice free, you know, you can dig out all of the you know what's in the ground. You know, all the important stuff we need. You know, to keep our system running. You know, and
to burn.
I think Donald Trump was already wise enough to make first approaches. You know, to buy Greenland. You know,
right. At least he didn't hide it. Yeah.
Yeah. But this is the thinking of those guys we saw in the cartoon, you know, in the corner in the right.
Yeah. And here are some more examples of what they're expecting in the next 20 to 30 years, and that's that Vietnam, 90% of Vietnam, for example, will be underwater at least once a year. Can you imagine a whole country being underwater pretty much? And Jakarta will be fully flooded and will need to move to another place.
Also, so a big opportunity to become the new Venice, right?
Yes, yeah, tourism.
I'm sorry for being sarcastic, but you know, at least we're helpless.
Yeah, and they're expecting just from the southeast, if all these predictions happen, that there's going to be 200 to 300 million refugees that will just need to move or perish. So just imagine what that would look like. We have had 80 million, like we discussed earlier, 80 million refugees so far from all the upheavals in the world at this point. Can you imagine 200 to 300 million adding to that? I can't.
Gonna be
guys, honestly, I'm glad that I passed my 50s.
Yeah, I think we probably all do, because the next generation is not going to be very happy.
No.
And the problem with what's going on is basically that this is a cycle. It's not just that we can just stop what we're doing and slow it down and it will all regulate, because we're putting into motion something that has a positive feedback. In other words, it drives itself. So we release CO2, Earth gets hotter, the Arctic Sea or the ice melts, and where it's highly reflective as ice, as water, it absorbs more sunlight. So it by itself adds to the warming. In addition to that, there is a thawing of the tundra, which captured CO2. So all the CO2 and methane, methane, is getting released into the atmosphere, and the heat stressed forest is adding, the bleaching of the oceans and this acidification that's caused by the warming is releasing even more greenhouse gases, and all of this is warming the oceans and releasing more CO2 and methane. So it's like a cycle. You can't. It's not something that you could easily just roll back. At some point, it takes a life of its own.
Amos, bring back that last slide. I want to make a few comments about it there.
Yes.
Yeah, and yes, it is a cycle, but the important thing to understand is there's this concept called a tipping point, and once you reach the tipping point, you can't go back to where you were. So you may do things to mitigate the damage. You may stop CO2 emissions, like that can happen. It's not going to happen, but say you did these impossible things. That doesn't mean we go back to where we were, because these tipping points aggravate what we're doing to the environment. They amplify the effects. Some people kind of go off the deep end with the cycle and the feedback, and then they take it too far and say that you know, we're going to be like Venus, and you know, we're going to have like you know, lakes of molten lead and stuff like that. Those people are kind of crazy and small in number, but you know, that people do this. They take things to the extreme, but it's really important to understand, you know, the concept of a tipping point of you know, making a change where you can't go back from it. Like if the Amazon is all cut down, the Amazon can't come back because the rain cycle, the hydrological cycle that it depends on, has been destroyed.
Yeah.
And there are other examples like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, and one thing that we're going to face is the methane. So you know, I see this. You put a slide in about the carbon that's dissolved in all the ice that's going to melt. You know, the carbon dioxide, because you know, that's something to think about. But in the far north, we have methane in the form of hydrates in the ocean, and also in the peat and just the undigested, unrotted biological refuse that's built up on the tundra plains and in the permafrost specifically, where it, you know, once it starts melting, the bacteria wake up, they start decomposing, and they start releasing, you know, the methane. And yeah, we're going to hit a slide soon where, yeah, when it comes up, I'll explain a little more.
Okay.
But sorry, go ahead.
Well, here's one that that tells you that 3,000 billion tons of carbon are going to be released from melting ice, which is what's the concern, and that means twice the carbon in vegetation and in the atmosphere now. So if you think that it's an adjustment, obviously it's not something that can be like tweaked. It's huge. So if we get to that spot where we are already at that spot, it's we have to put on all the brakes now. There's no point for any delays because we're already behind the game.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you want to mention that?
yeah. I put this slide in. This is from a video I actually made. It's a mashup, and it's like 17 minutes long. We're not watching the whole thing. The part we're only watching is about a minute long, and it's bringing up, you know, some people call it the methane bomb, because if all this methane comes out at once, we are toast. We're gone. I mean, that's it. But, you know, the world's really a big place. The world's also round. You know, the stuff at the top will last longer than the stuff at, say, a lower latitude. And it can't come out at once. So really, we don't know what's going on, is the truth of the matter. And it's a huge unknown thing. Yeah, but there's you know, the possibility of methane making things horribly bad in the very near future is something to think about. And I was kind of basing a story I was writing on this concept. Yeah. So
Yeah, and this is what we I'm afraid of. What's going to happen in Siberia, right? You know, when the permafrost disappears, what's going on? There is megatons of methane in the ground there.
Yeah, and methane is also what we call a natural gas. With the our friendly name, that's the same. That's the same thing, and it's also what we fart. So
we don't have to worry about cows and steaks anymore. You know, that's bullshit.
Oh, Amos, we haven't mentioned how much more dangerous methane is per volume than CO2.
Yeah, it's 84%, 84% more. It's like I think the current belief it's 5 times more affects the atmosphere or blocks absorption, but five times more than carbon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The number varies because methane will break down after about a century. So if you released a kilogram of methane into the air, you know, a century later, I think only half of it or a bit less than half of it will still be in the air. So if you look at 100-year span of of methane, then it's equivalent to 28 times the greenhouse warming effect of CO2, whereas when it's first released, it's 85 times.
Yeah, it
And
decays
then
faster,
another
but
gas
it's worse.
that's
Yeah.
even worse, which nitrogen oxide.
We'll get
which,
to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just let me mention, since we're on this topic, because there's the cow story, because Republicans were making fun of progressives that were talking about having to reduce the industrial farm industry, and that is true. The industrial farms do add methane. However, the initial belief that of the impact of these agricultural release of methane is far lesser than they initially thought. They caught an error. We made a segment about it like a couple of years ago, I believe. There was a paper that was published, and they distinctly identified that there was a mistake in identifying the footprint of or idea of where this methane came from, and it's actually methane that was released by the fossil fuel industry while they were fracking natural gas. So it turns out that is far more. It's like 20 times more than the what's released from agriculture. So that is really the true culprit. It hasn't received the proper attention, but that is unfortunately the case. You want me to roll this clip?
Yeah, this clip specifically will tell us how much methane there is in the Arctic.
Observed in form of methane in the eastern Arctic shelf is approximately from hundreds to thousands of gigatons. And of course, it's only 1% of that amount is required to double the atmospheric burden of methane. But to destabilize 1% of this carbon pool, I think it's not much effort needed, considering that the state of permafrost and the amount of methane currently involved.
And one more remark from Dr. Shakova.
The worst thing might happen. Shortly speaking, we do not like what we see there. Absolutely do not like.
And I wanted to address some of those. If you're in an argument with a conservative and they come up with those bullshit arguments that they've been using, I want you to be able to be armed with counter responses. So one of the things is that they say, well, the Earth has gone through such climate changes in the past. This is natural. It's not a big issue. Well, it has never in the history of Earth gotten to that in terms of the unprecedented rate of warming. So if something was warming, it was over thousands of years. Animals and plants had some chance of moving or adjusting to it. In this current situation, we're in dipshit. So this is not anything like compared to a natural process of cycling through climate extremes as has happened in the past. And when they have happened, that has made major changes on everything. Somehow life survived, but it definitely affected some creatures that died off and others took their place. So this is not much of a consolation, and we know this one is being highly correlated to our release of these greenhouse gases. This has been proven over and over. There's like almost a one-to-one response, and so there's no doubt that we're driving this. Another thing they say is so another thing is that this atmospheric conditions that are being created have not happened in the last 30 million years. So that's way above what human history has been. If no action is taken, let's say we let it do business as usual, will reach conditions that have not been seen on Earth 100 million years. So this is not something to look forward to. And
I did this to you. I threw this in there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I saw these two Trumpers in the deck, these two slides in the deck of this Mr. Two Terms talking sense. And I go, well, you can't have them saying things like they know what's going on. So this was obviously one that came to his senses. And so I added another slide to carry on to show that this guy's, he's had an epiphany. And so now he's going to use his redneck wisdom to help us. So that's why I say, it's time to fish or cut bait. We got to do something about this problem here.
Yeah.
So you learned a little bit about geoengineering, not to say that's right or wrong, that's another issue.
Yeah,
but to say, the fact is CO2 by 1 part per million takes 8 billion tons of CO2 to be carbon to be sequestered.
Yeah,
it's a lot of carbon.
And if you look at the first slide, if even if what's happening today is not caused by us, by humans, it doesn't change the fact what's going on, and that we have to do something about it, right? It doesn't change the fact that we are getting boiled like frogs in the pot if we don't do anything.
But the delay game goes on because power,
of course,
the way they are.
Of course. And this is why I can only repeat myself. I say this, I don't know for how long right now. An effective fight against the disastrous climate catastrophe cannot be done with capitalism. It can only happen without capitalism.
Oh, totally agree. Oh, yes.
That's the point in it.
It's making money make the decisions, and people, it takes away human agency.
Yes,
and
it takes away rationality.
Yes,
and that's even worse.
Yeah. And there's another thing you should know, and that is, like, we're still not seeing the worst of it because we have that momentary tempering of this warming by the fact that when you melt ice, it actually takes energy from the surroundings, so it cools you down temporarily. It cools you down when you melt the ice, but that is not repeatable. You go through the ice and that is it. And then the real rate is discovered, the real heat rate. So we're not seeing the worst of it.
In that video we played about where Roger Helm was talking, he got into that, and that never mind. There's just so much to talk about.
I know.
And you wanted to mention the wet bulb.
Yes, that's another reason I want to talk about this slide. Is this is kind of a coming to a future near you cartoon that we're going to look at.
The National Weather Service declared a wet bulb alert for several states in the American South and Midwest. A wet bulb emergency occurs when the air is so hot and humid that people are unable to cool their bodies with perspiration. This is measured with a thermometer wrapped in wet cloth. Exposure to these conditions can result in death in a matter of hours. For 3 days, people sheltered anxiously in air-conditioned homes and public buildings, awaiting the passing of the lethal heat wave. They emerged from their air-conditioned shelters into a new reality. The ground was littered with dead birds. Dead leaves fell from lifeless trees. There was no denying anymore. The Earth's climate was rapidly changing, with lethal consequences for humans and other living creatures. When there was ice at the North Pole, the difference between cold Arctic air and warmer air in the mid-latitudes created a robust jet stream. But when the polar ice melted, the blue ocean underneath absorbed more heat and became warmer. The jet stream lost energy and became weaker, loopier, and more disorganized. Heat waves became hotter and lasted longer, worsening droughts, crops failed, famines increased. Slower, more powerful tropical storms and hurricanes caused catastrophic flooding. Worst of all, a rapidly warming Arctic Ocean unleashed a sleeping giant. Methane hydrates, frozen for eons, erupted into the atmosphere, accelerating global temperatures beyond what human life could endure.
Yes, yeah, and that tape with Roger Helm that I was referring to earlier made the point in that segment shortly after the part we watched. He makes the point where once the ice is gone, it stays gone. All the predictions of the polar ice leaving the Arctic show that it doesn't come back next year. The first year it's gone, and that's a tipping point.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like the clip, because it has in under a minute, everything we were just talking about, and yeah,
it's a very good clip. Yeah, the wet bulb temperature is 35 degrees C, or it's 92 degrees Fahrenheit, and what it means is at those temperatures, if you have 100% humidity, within a few hours, you're dead, because your body cannot survive. You can't cool down because the humidity air is so hot that your perspiration can't cool you down. So it can be warmer and you can have less humidity, and then the wet bulb temperature moves up a bit, right? So if you've got 80% humidity, maybe it's got to be like 100 degrees. I don't know. There's a chart that gives you all the answers. But throughout human history, the Earth really doesn't ever, reach wet bulb temperatures anywhere. But we're always, there are places in the world that have always been just on the hairy edge, just below it. And so the first place that it's likely to happen where there'll be large die-offs is Southeast Asia and along the coast of China. But, the way things are with the unpredictability, the unknown contribution that methane could contribute, we got to do something. One thing Extinction Rebellion does is they make a point where if you were on an airplane, if you're going to take an airplane flight, and you were told that this plane flight has a 15% chance of crashing, and and an 85% chance of getting you where you want to go just fine, would you get on the plane? Of course you would. 15%? You're going to risk your life for 15%? Well, in terms of the climate, the global heating crisis, that's exactly what's going on. This is, why are progressives talking about this? Because it's change. We got to change what we're doing. We have people who like things the way they are, who benefit from the current system, and they will prevent change as much as they can. And in the slide that we're going to watch, I put in this clip because there's a climate scientist making a very good point that we also have to, pay attention to. And one point in that is that whatever we've been doing to try to avert this situation has not been enough, and we need to step things up and maybe change some tactics. I'm not saying how. That's for everybody to figure out together. So
we'd be in a much better place, that's for sure. In fact, things have gone in the opposite direction in that last 30 years. And the size of the problem is roughly double what it was in the late 80s. We've got the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is approximately twice what it was in the late 1980s now. So we've gone absolutely in the wrong direction. And we are now in a pretty, really urgent situation. It's still physically possible if the global economy can be moved to renewable energy quickly enough and at a level that really cuts into greenhouse gas emissions, then it's all still possible, and we can save the West Antarctic ice sheet and all the rest of it. But we really need to get on with it and make some significant progress in the next few years.
Okay, we are literally all in this together. So
we certainly are.
James, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me on your Friday evening.
Okay, well, very nice to talk to you.
Got a
Yeah.
Another issue is the nitrogen. We spoke about methane, worse than carbon. Well, nitrogen is even worse. Nitrogen in the atmosphere is 265 times the effects of
Nitrogen
carbon.
oxide.
Nitrogen oxide, that's the format that it appears when it's released into the atmosphere. It's also known as laughing gas. Known as laughing gas. This is what's going out into the atmosphere. And we are using nitrogen in all commercial farming. So this is SOS. We have to stop using practices and start doing things in a non-monoculture way, in a way that allows not using pesticides, not using nitrogen, using natural processes that have worked for forever. We need the bees, as pollinators, we need the insects, and when you look at it, basically, the truth is it's all about the soil. The soil is one of the major components in this story, and it's.
Amos, I just want to add one thing about that last slide you showed.
Yeah.
When I looked, I saw that, and I was curious about what other gases might be really bad, and I found out that the winner of the gases for global heating is sulfur hexafluoride, which is like they actually use this stuff to inflate tennis balls with, and the gas that's in one tennis ball is equivalent to the CO2 a car puts out in 5 years.
No way.
Yes, it's like 13,000 times the CO2 equivalent or something. So maybe you don't get to 5 years there or whatever, but it's 13,000 times instead of like the 265.
I did not know that. I did not know that.
They should kill all professional tennis players.
Well, they're not to blame.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm pretty sure they're not aware. But holy fuck!
Yeah, it better not be going on. They better have stopped it.
I have a family member who is a keen tennis player. I can't wait to tell him.
Kill him, Amos. Kill him.
No. But basically, the true hero in the story is the soil, and we're 15% of the release of these greenhouse gases are improper handling of the soil in commercial agriculture and land management, deforestation, over-tilling, commercial fertilization, monoculture, and insecticide use. They're all causing the grounds to die. It is a living organism. It's not an exaggeration when they say that it is a living organism. It is literally something alive. It has bacteria, and I've been studying that in regards to my own little growing of vegetables and stuff in my yard. Permaculture is real. These insects are disposing from like dead plants. They break it down so that bacteria and fungus can get at them. Those in turn bring nutrients to the roots of plants and feed off sugars that the roots of plants provide to them in order to create this culture. It is a whole system. It's a whole system, and if you break that system, you end up with dry, infertile soil that erodes and gets swept into the oceans, and that's what has been going on en masse around the world, and this is also something very, very serious. And
it's called food industry, Amos.
Well, it is. Yes, it's called food industry, and the point is that it needs to be somehow curtailed to start growing things responsibly, and we're far from
yes.
that. But we have to start talking about this with our families, with our friends, and start putting the spotlight on this.
Yeah, this is a very interesting slide to me because a few years ago, I realized I didn't know what soil was. I didn't know what dirt was, and like, what's it made out of? And so I got into it myself, and it's fascinating. You have to have a biological system, an ecosystem that is going to build up a surplus of mostly digested organic material that's mixed into a matrix of minerals and the living organisms that you're talking about. And that, gardeners, quickly, if you do any gardening, you're going to get into this, and the agriculture, that modern agriculture, we till, and when we till, we expose oxygen to the soil where it degrades. So we only have 60 years left. By current agricultural practices are causing the loss of 30 soccer fields every second, are being lost of arable land. And, in places like where I live, the climate is such that we can actually build soil pretty quickly. Like in my garden, I can till stuff in and it decomposes, and it rains enough that stuff grows right away. You could plow it back in. And so in our immediate area, soil degradation, through natural farming is not really as much of an issue. But in other places, it takes like 1,000 years to build up 1/3 of an inch of it through natural processes. And what's happened is when the Midwest of the United States was settled, you had farmers coming in, and they plowed up the prairies, started tilling, and they basically, they had like several thousand years worth of natural buildup. And it's like everything else, the oil we've taken out of the ground that took forever to build up is just being mined and depleted. And I don't think most people really understand that our agriculture, the way it is, it's actually set up to be an extractive process like mining, and that it's not sustainable. And that's why people are always going on about permaculture and soil and stuff, because taking care of this and doing responsible agriculture, our kind of our lives kind of depend on it.
And I put this slide in because there's always this debate, and people on the right say, well, why should the U.S. do it when China is not doing? Well, the U.S. is 4% of the world population. Its pollution is 15%. So we have some culpability in this, and we have to address it. And yeah, China, we have to make China do it too, but this is not an excuse for the U.S. not to do it. And there's people who would want us to go that route, and that's, I'm talking about the industry. We'll get to that in a minute.
That's another delay tactic.
So basically, in order to fix our problem, we had to remove 40 billion tons of emission every year from now on until net zero, and that's a lot.
Yeah.
This is the Republicans covering their eyes and saying, there, now it doesn't exist. Wow, it really works. And that's funny because the same opposite is being drawn in conservative media, and this is how they see
but
it.
But the cartoonists should have also at the Democrats, because they are not serious in this game as well,
Right. Well, because
otherwise they would have done
correct
politics against it.
There are a core bunch of people who are the culprit in that, and we will get to that in the section we're going into. But this is how Republicans they look at the global climate change, and they think that it's a puff of air. Well, in this case, it's the capital, but I'm making a wider point here.
They see what they want to see.
Yeah.
And here's what we promised you an expose about the fossil fuel industry. Greenpeace has set up a lobbyist for the ExxonMobile Corporation, and he got him to think that he was recruiting him for a position, but instead they were recording it, and he has exposed things that we've been thinking and saying here, but that hasn't yet had. We haven't had the proof. We haven't heard it from the horse's mouth, and this is the horse's mouth.
And Joe Manchin is mentioned.
Go with the first one.
Hi, good to see you.
How are you?
Moments later, Mr. McCoy will become one of the first ever executives to claim that ExxonMobil has aggressively fought climate science using front organizations to maximize shareholder profit.
Did we aggressively fight against some of the science? Yes. Did we join some of these shadow groups to work against some of the early efforts? Yes, that's true. But there's nothing illegal about that. We were looking out for our investments. We were looking out for our shareholders.
In response, Exxon said, "We've supported climate science for decades and accused Greenpeace of waging a multi-decade campaign against them and the industry." Keith McCoy thinks he's being headhunted for a new job. In fact, of course, he's being covertly filmed. Congressmen are fish. Exxon is the fisherman.
When you have an opportunity to talk to a member of Congress, I liken it to fishing, right? You have bait, you throw that bait out. It's all these opportunities that you use, and to use the fishing analogy again, just to kind of reel them in, because they're a captive audience. They know they need you, and I need them.
Senators pressed to do Exxon's bidding behind closed doors.
You want to be able to go to the chief, and so the chief knows you, that you can go to the chief and say, look, we've got this issue. We need Congressman so-and-so to be able to either introduce this bill. We need him to make a floor statement. We need him to send a letter. You name it. We've asked for everything.
So who are the fish?
I'm Joe Manchin. I approve this act because
the biggest catch, according to Mr. Coy, it's the conservative Democrat Senator Joe Manchin, who famously shot President Obama's cap-and-trade climate bill.
And I'll take dead aim at the cap-and-trade bill.
Joe Manchin, I talk to his office every week. He is the kingmaker, and he's not shy about sort of staking his claim early and completely changing the debate.
Legal declarations show that Senator Manchin has received tens of thousands of dollars from ExxonMobil and its trade associations. Keith McCoy names 10 other senators as crucial to ExxonMobil. Senators Mark Kelly, Chris Coons, Shelley Moore Capito, Kirsten Sinema, John Tester, Maggie Hassan, John Barrasso, Steve Daines, John Cornyn, and Marco Rubio. All bar Kelly and Hassan have taken money from Exxon totaling $117,000. We gave all these senators a chance to respond. None did so. Exxon insists our lobbying efforts are fully compliant with all laws and are publicly disclosed on a quarterly basis. Nonetheless, a degree of secrecy appears to be key. The last thing Exxon seems to want is open accountability, facing Congress in public.
We don't want it to be us to have these conversations, especially in a hearing. It's getting our associations to step in and have those conversations and answer those tough questions and be the for lack of a better term, the whipping boy for some of these members of Congress.
So he says they hide behind trade bodies to avoid public scrutiny on the Hill.
Our CEO was invited to a hearing from a member of Congress who we know is just going to rip him to shreds when he goes there. The main thing that they're looking at is just to get ExxonMobil in front of a congressional hearing so they can rip us apart.
Big oil, big power, big pressure. The route from the K Street lobbyist offices to Capitol Hill is very well trodden. From the street to the Hill, we can now reveal the current ExxonMobil battleground and strategy.
It's big, yes. It's bold, yes. And we can get it done.
Just last week, as America continues to suffer heat waves described as apocalyptic and linked to the current climate crisis, President Biden fought to get Congress to pass his $2 trillion showpiece law, linking jobs and infrastructure to massive spending to combat climate change. On Capitol Hill, though, Exxon was also fighting to strip out spending on climate. Forget that, it lobbied. Stick to roads and bridges.
So that's a completely different conversation. When you start to stick to roads and bridges, and instead of a $2 trillion bill, it's an $800 billion bill. If you lower that threshold, you stick to highways and bridges, then a lot of the negative stuff starts to come out. Why would you put in something on emissions reductions on climate change to oil refineries in a highway bill? So, and people say, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. So you get to the germaneness and say that shouldn't be in this bill.
Sure enough, last week Biden's behemoth bill evaporated. A new law may be agreed, but major green initiatives are gone. Coincidence? Or the big oil effect? Nothing illegal, just oiling the wheels of power.
And that reveals a whole playbook of how they're acting, and it's not surprising to us, I think, but it is so amazing to hear this so cynically put in words by a lobbyist, and you know, people like that, in my opinion, should be trialed and executed, because they're the reason we're having this issue. Not
they are climate terrorists.
Absolutely.
I could not be a politician. You know, I did the little math calculation watching this, and like my soul, you know, this soul here, it's worth more than $10,000. I'm sorry. You know, a goddamn oil company has billions of dollars, and they buy our politicians for $10,000 a piece and ruin our, and basically, you know, sell us down the river.
Well, some of it you don't see. Some of that money you don't see because it's funneled through PACs and other like groups of supposedly independent that are running ads.
You know, do you know what I would do, you know, and get even more money out of it? I would make it public. You know, social media. Look, these motherfuckers contacted me, you know, they want to buy me. They offered me this amount, you know.
Right, but
can
you
you
never
top
get
this?
Offers like that by people who are against, who would do that. Like you can't imagine them offering AOC or someone like that to buy them off.
Alexandria Ocasio? Come on.
No, I don't think they would go with that. Anyway, here's the next one, talking about forever chemicals, which are the chemicals, like if you've watched the movie Dark Waters, those Teflon production materials that got into the water and like literally poisoned an entire region. Here it goes.
Tonight, more major revelations. First, America's biggest oil company secretly uses what are known as forever chemicals. They're used by industry in everything from non-stick pans through waterproof clothing to cosmetics, even though safer alternatives now exist. Per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, linked by independent research to cancer, hormone disruption, weakened immunity, and they're called forever chemicals because they stay in the environment forever.
We manufacture PFAS, the chemical. We use it in our firefighting equipment.
A dramatic disclosure that the company uses forever chemicals, so toxic they've become the stuff of Hollywood.
How many did you lose? 190. 190 cows. You tell me nothing's wrong here.
The film Dark Waters, the true story of a town contaminated by these forever chemicals. But forget Hollywood. Just this week, the US president addressed the scourge of forever chemical pollution across America.
We're also going to surge federal resources to help address the forever chemicals, not just here, but all across America.
You know, there's no cleaning it up. So, I mean, it's...
So this is Keith McCoy, a senior ExxonMobil lobbyist on Capitol Hill, being covertly recorded by Greenpeace UK, who suddenly realised he's just made a dramatic claim.
Do people know that Exxon makes that chemical at all? No one
Nope.
knows.
Nope.
So
Nobody.
Yesterday, ExxonMobil flatly denied actually making forever chemicals. Today they clarified, saying they do use forever chemicals in some of their products.
You've managed to lobby successfully on that while keeping it completely...
The good thing is that the debate isn't who makes it. There isn't the debate right now about who manufactures it, thankfully.
That's because ExxonMobil covertly killed the debate in Congress. How? Well, first they saw approaching danger, a Congress about to pass laws on forever chemicals.
And we're like, holy crap, this is legislation, this is a chemical that we manufacture, this is a chemical that we use. If word got out that ExxonMobil manufactured those chemicals, it's a talking point, you know? It becomes the ExxonMobil chemical. Then all of a sudden, they start talking about how this is an ExxonMobil chemical and ExxonMobil is poisoning our waterways. The debate's pretty much over.
So that public scrutiny had to be stopped fast. They needed someone to stamp it out. So send in the faceless trade body. Cue the powerful American Petroleum Institute, the API.
So API goes up to the Hill as API with coalitions. It's just associations, no companies. But the public face of it are the associations. They go to the Hill, and that tamps down the rhetoric. It tamps down the excitement.
And the prize, pressure Congress to kick the can down the road, delay laws on forever chemicals by commissioning a study.
Lo and behold, we got a study, we got it passed. And that completely lowered the temperature. There's been very little talk about PFAS.
Take risks.
The API told Channel 4 News they're out front and transparent about where the oil and gas industry stands on policy issues.
I think this guy is probably not going to be employed much longer. The ExxonMobil CEO has kind of distanced himself and said he was shocked to watch this and such, but we all know what the truth of it is. This guy's telling it as it is.
Yes, it was very important for them, to emphasize that everything they were doing is legal, and there was nothing illegal done.
Yeah, of course,
and
it's
nothing
legal,
illegal will ever be done, and bullshit,
Yeah, it's legal, but it's completely.
Who makes the rules? That's the question, That who makes the rules that this might be legal?
And he's also laid out the whole delay tactic. How they had they come up with like a supposedly independent PAC. They pretend that they're supporting the environment and they're meeting with the congressmen and so forth, and then they're pushing for a study to be conducted to better understand and respond to the issues. And then that takes the heat off it. It goes into the back end. It further delays the whole process, and that's exactly what they want. And these supposed organizations, even the industry itself, ExxonMobil, they claimed, and we touched on this when we were talking about the carbon tax. We said that was kind of surprising that they were behind it, and we had some theories. He actually exposed what we said back like a couple of weeks ago, and said that it was a PR move. This is all like just to do it in the front end. While they don't believe that it's ever going to happen, they have enough brakes and levers to stop it from happening, so they're pretending they're all for it to put on a positive face. And he actually says that word for word in this interview. So
I mean, a couple of weeks ago when this came up and I saw the brands, you know, you know, you saw my reaction. You know, this could not be true.
Yeah.
Best government money can buy.
Yep. Yes, we saw this. Yeah, Cinema, Rubio, Manchin. You know, to name the most prominent.
Yeah,
they're all in it.
Well, doesn't this slide say 11? I only saw 10 slides on I counted them when they were up on the video. But if you add Joe Manchin, you're right. That's where they get the 11.
And here's the Congress. The congressman says, "I solemnly swear that I will protect and defend the Constitution of the United States." The lobbyist says, "And I solemnly swear that I will not give him any more money if he doesn't." So
yes, and I remember in this context, I remember there is an old video on YouTube, you know, where it shows Ronald Reagan at his time, you know, being president. You know, you're getting orders from a little guy, you know, who turned out to be one of the representatives of General Electric. You know, they already got him in the pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do we got there?
This is something I just made for fun. It's you know, you got to have a little humor with the end of the world. So I just did it. Just kind of fun. That's
okay.
I am the eye in the sky, looking